right now. Hi, again. I'm Bobak Ferdowsi, system engineer at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory here in Pasadena, California, where we're all gathered to watch the series finale of The Big Bang Theory, Bittersweet Ending. And I'm going to introduce our panelists here. I'm going to ask you guys, each of you, to answer the following: what you do, and who are you most like on the show? So, beginning with Dr. Vandana Desai.
Now you have to describe IPAC again.
I'm an extragalactic astronomer on the Caltech campus. I work at IPAC, which is a science and data analysis center. And if I had to choose one character that I identify with most, it would have to be Leonard. He is the everyman on the show, and I think probably most of you identify with Leonard. If not, it's a little bit scary, but...
Speak for yourself. And next to her, Dr. Jessie Christiansen.
Hi everyone, I'm Jessie Christiansen. I search for planets around other stars with NASA's Exoplanet Science Institute, which is also part of IPAC on the Caltech campus. If I had to choose which character I'm like, I would say Leslie, which is a pretty deep pull for real fans of the show. She was in the first couple of seasons. She was the female equivalent of Leonard, who, as Vandana described, is the every person on the show. So I'm the female every person on the show.
And Dr. Varoujan Gorjian.
Hello, everybody. I'm an astronomer, and I work primarily at NASA's JPL. But I also spend some time at IPAC, and I primarily study supermassive black holes at the centers of galaxies, but I'm also getting a little bit in on the exoplanet game, looking for planets around other stars. And I'm going to put a little bit of a mix and match here. I would say I'm about 50% Leonard, but I would cop to 20% Sheldon. And then I'm an astronomer, so maybe some Raj in there, and then I think some distribution of Amy Farrah Fowler amongst that too.
I, obviously, as the only non-doctor up here, this is a very even distribution to the show. I'm obviously the Howard of the group. I have worked on Mars rovers. I don't have quite as many mother issues, but it's pretty close. And I have a little bit of a personal connection there. I want to ask you guys, the show's been on a long time. How do you feel like it's normalized science for most people? Let's start here.
I always have to go first.
Oh, we'll change it.
So I actually feel like the show takes the extremes of personalities that are among scientists and sort of like shoves it in your face. And so it makes the audience have to say, have to confront those extremes. And I think one of the nice things is that mostly people are pretty accepting. And I think it's kind of interesting how you can take these personalities and, that historically, and even in the background of the scientists on the show who got bullied over it, now you have had for so many years so much love for the show, and people are like, yeah, I want to hang out with those people every week for 12 years. So I think that's my answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the show really rode this wave where there was a cultural shift where nerds were cool again. They were cool for a while, and then they weren't cool for a while. We came back. We had a comeback, and the show was part of that, making scientists interesting and cool and funny and one-dimensional. But there were four of them, so four-dimensional space-time. We covered the bases, the personality, orthogonality. So yeah, I think the show was really part of this wave of cultural shift towards nerds having their time in the sun again and science being cool.
And I think the funniest part, to me, which I hadn't expected, but it got everybody to root for them. That no matter how different they were, I think everybody started seeing themselves as your difference didn't matter. It was just the fact that if you had a difference and you didn't feel included, this show had this sense of fundamentally, it's a group of people, they're happy with who they are, and in particular, it brought the science in there with that. And so people started rooting for them. You were pulling for all the characters, as well as for them to have success in their careers, which meant they were pulling for the science and the engineering, and were thinking about it. And I think that was something really nice to have on a weekly basis, to get people to think about science and pull for the people who were doing the science.
Yeah, obviously we found a good sense of community, obviously, on the show, as well as, I think, for people like us who do feel like sometimes ostracized or whatever, and less so, I think, over the course of the time the show's been on, which is really nice. Do you guys feel like it's changed sort of stereotypes about scientists? Jesse, you want to?
So when I was thinking about the stereotype question, I was actually thinking about the stereotypes that were true. The fact that they're gamers and they're comic book nerds, the way nerddom, encompasses so many different types of nerddom. They're not just scientists, but they do all the other things. And I was thinking about the fact that we're all nerds in lots of different ways as well. I was at a party at Kip Thorne's house, Nobel Prize winner, like the name drop, just thought I'd throw it in there. It's a party and there's a barbecue and people are grilling and there's a pool and there's a hot tub and we're all inside playing Settlers of Catan, trying to get sheep and wood from each other. And I just remember thinking like, oh my God, we are really nerds. So in terms of the stereotypes, the fact that, you can be lots of different flavor of nerd was something that they showed on the show and really I think is true to real life as well, that there's so many different flavors of nerd.
Yeah, I mean, I personally love to cosplay. I've been to a few Star Trek conventions, and I think I would have been a lot more shy about that. I'm sure I was a lot more shy about that, 10, 15 years ago than I am today, which I think, is attributed somewhat to the changing stereotypes, not just from this show, but, across the board. I don't know, you guys have other embarrassing secrets you'd like to share. I dressed up as Spock.
I did not buy this shirt for this event. I already had it. So there's that. I was an undergrad at Caltech, and so we would go to the comic book store every Saturday and then go to play video games. So in that sense, I mean, it certainly hit those hallmarks of various kinds of nerddom, but at the same time, I think it's one of those things that familiarity breeds familiarity. And so once the people
That's not the saying.
Well, this is the version I'm using. And so I think that's the thing, is that once people are seeing it, these characters were in their home, these likes and so on. So even though the stereotypes, again, were caricatures in many ways, but fundamentally I think that made people like, oh, okay, well, that's fine. That's one flavor. People like sports, people like Dungeons and Dragons and so on. So I think it really did, fundamentally change it in that way.
Yeah.
I was just going to say the thing that I recognize most, because I actually don't cosplay or play I did play Dungeons and Dragons last week, but that was just that was a one-time thing.
That's what they all say the first time.
You were holding it for a friend.
I was thinking.
Sorry, can we ask what your character was in the Dungeons and Dragons?
She was actually playing
I had to play multiple characters because
That's advanced.
I only have 3 people in my family, and my little boy wanted to play Dungeons and Dragons a lot, and we had to make it, So I was a cleric and like a Lightfoot half person.
Shout out to the clerics, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to lend you my game of Munchkin that you can play with your family.
Anyway, I was going to say the stereotype that I recognize from the show most is this sort of this drive and focus, and sometimes veering into single-mindedness that I see as a characteristic of most of the scientists I know, like whether or not they partake in those cultural, other things, they're very into what they do, and it's that sort of focus that I think is, I think it's both a positive stereotype and a true one.
I think the show got a lot of things right. I think one thing that they missed on in terms of our everyday lives is they don't show people dealing with email as much as my real job consists of.
That is very
Are
Who
there
would
any
watch
other-
that show?
You don't watch a show, a person just like, come to work and respond to 50 emails before they do anything meaningful with their day? That's so strange.
And let's not
I don't
forget
understand.
meetings.
Yeah,
you don't
a lot
have
of
huge
meetings.
sections of the show. We're sitting in a meeting.
I think my job is a lot more normal than the show would create my version of the job. Are there differences between what people, kind of, when you say describe your job, to what they think you do versus what you actually do, besides emails?
Should I go first?
Sure, please.
Yeah, so, Varoujan is an astronomer, so there are not many astronomers on regular TV. But the one thing that they do showing doing most is working at a telescope or using a remote observing. We don't do that. We do that maybe a few times a year. Even if you're very successful at getting telescope time, maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks of observing time. But for example, when I'm working with the Spitzer Space Telescope, I'm not going into space to use the Spitzer Space Telescope. It radios down all that data. So in fact, my time at the observatory is actually very much less than what it's portrayed. But anytime you say astronomer, you have to show them at the telescope. And it's like, no, I got the data, and now I'm just sitting at my computer, punching away, trying to understand what I got.
Yeah, people see astronomer and they're like, your eye's glued to the eyepiece, and they don't see that you're actually just like at your terminal fighting with Python environments all day. And I don't mean like Steve Irwin Python fighting, even with the accent. I mean like actual coding and virtual environments. It's very all day.
So I actually asked my son, what do you think I do at work? Because was trying to figure out, I was doing my research, do my homework, and he said, I think you sleep all day. And I was like, really? And then he said, also you have a lot of telecons. And he was right, because I do have a lot,
It's that meeting, a lot of meetings. I mean, for me, I know that most people think engineering, they're always imagining, we're sitting in some cool lab code, working with some electronics in front of me, and a lot of my time is PowerPoint.
Don't shatter that dream, Bobak.
I want you guys to please pursue engineering, but also realize PowerPoint skills do matter in what you do.
The other thing I would say, anyone below the age of 10 doesn't really understand the distinction between an astronomer and an astronaut. So I have to spend a lot of time explaining that I don't know how to pee in space or poo in space, because that's what people under the age of 10 really care about when they meet me. What's it like to go to the toilet in space?
Okay, I will also say that it took many years before my mother stopped calling me an astrologer.
That's pretty good. To be fair, I think one of the cool things that we're sort of hinting at here is, I think as a kid as well, when I thought about space, I only thought astronaut. And there's so many more interesting jobs associated with it, which all of us are doing, and so many other people. Why don't we talk about what we're all working on in a little more detail? I know that you sort of said IPAC earlier, but let's maybe kind of delve into it a little bit.
Okay, so my job really has two parts, and one is research. It's supposed to be research. I find my other part takes a long time. But so for my research, I said that I was an extragalactic astronomer, and I'm also an observer, so I did actually have remote observing a couple weeks ago, which was hard. It's really hard to stay up all night and do work when you can hear your husband snoring in the room over. You really want to go to sleep. But right now I'm studying really nearby galaxies, and I'm trying to map out the star formation in them. And so it is in a very observing heavy state right now. And we'll be moving into the data analysis in the next phase. But then for my, I would say most of my time right now is being spent on the archive, which is one part of IPAC. And so I'm really thinking about, NASA makes all these really cool missions that produce tons of data, and that data volume is really growing. And so I spend a lot of time thinking, how can we help astronomers in the community use the data? I mean, once there's so much, it's really hard to find what's important in it. And so I spend a lot of time thinking about that lately.
Yeah, it's interesting how much our jobs change also over the course of time. When I'm working on engineering things, there's a lot of early development, a lot of, sadly, PowerPoint. And then you slowly move into the real, here's some circuit diagrams, and here's some, hardware that's being built, and eventually testing it and operating it. When you guys kind of talk about what you do, I'd love to hear a little bit about how it varies from period to period. Jessie?
Sure. So like Vandana, I have two parts of my job. So the research part is looking for planets around other stars. So I use two different NASA space telescopes. Oh, three now, because I can count Spitzer. I found a planet with Spitzer last year. Very exciting.
That's pretty awesome, guys. I have never found a planet.
So I used the NASA Kepler telescope before it very sadly had to be turned off last year. Then the Spitzer telescope, and now NASA TESS, which is a new mission that we launched last year to hunt for planets. So I'm really interested in finding how common planets are around other stars. We have 8 planets around our star, and our star is just a boring star. So I want to know all the other stars in the sky. Do they have planets around them? How common? What kind? Are they like Earth? So those are the questions I'm trying to answer. And then the other part of my job, which dovetails quite nicely, is I help run the NASA Exoplanet Archive. So this is how NASA keeps track of how many exoplanets we found, where they are, what star they orbit, everything we know about them. And my role is I get to decide what goes in. So I'm how NASA decide what an exoplanet is. So that kind of feels like fun. That's a power trip.
I'm just curious, how many are we at right now?
Oh, very good question. We are at 3,970, which means we're only 30 exoplanets away from 4,000 in total. So we have this social media campaign right now, #exoplanet4K. Go and look at all of the cool entries. If you go and tweet about it, you can enter the competition, and we'll have a set of posters for you if yours is the entry we choose when we pass 4,000 exoplanets.
That's so cool. It blows my mind how much of that's happened so recently. There's just all in the last few years. How about you?
Well, on that point,
please.
When I started grad school in the early 90s, there were 9 planets in the universe, and I'm not misusing the word universe. That is, all the planets we knew in the universe were the ones in our solar system, and Pluto was counted as a planet at that point. So in the middle of that, suddenly these exoplanets started coming up, and then sort of Pluto got changed to dwarf planet. But That's it. It's been within my career, we went to literally from 0 planets outside of our solar system to nearly 4,000. So that arc has been just amazing to watch. And then eventually now I'm getting to be a part of it. So that's part of what I do. With Spitzer, we do a lot of follow-up of both. Originally, the Kepler mission had discovered some planets, and we would do follow-up. And then the TESS mission is doing it. And because we work at longer wavelengths in the thermal infrared, we can get the temperatures of some of these planets. So that's some of the work that I'm doing, helping others too. So I'm just sort of
It's
moving.
mostly bad news when we find the temperature.
Yeah, they're hot planets, but not in the good.
Did you get the lava world planet outside? That's what we're talking about.
But the other thing, the main thing that I've been doing most of the time is studying these supermassive black holes at the centers of galaxies. And as material falls into that, the black hole, of course, how do you study a black hole? It's black. Not much to study in that sense. But as material falls into it, it actually heats up an enormous amount. And we can study that gas that's falling in, and that tells us a lot about the black hole itself, as well as sort of the environment and the galaxy that it sits in. And so that's what I've been studying for most of my career and trying to get a better sense of it, because the most luminous objects in the universe, I should say most continuously luminous objects in the universe, are these accreting supermassive black holes, and they're called quasars. And you can see them clear across the universe. And the better we understand them, then it will help us to better understand sort of the history of galaxy evolution. But in terms of, the things that I do, we were talking about, what the expectations are on a daily basis, talking about emails. The most useful classes, in addition to math and science and astronomy, my English class. And that's, one of the things that because I write all the time. I write papers, I write emails, and then that has also led me, by being a better communicator, to do, part of my job is to do education and public outreach. And there's a particular program where NASA scientists, myself included, as a part of a program called NITARP, Google that if you're interested, if you're a high school science teacher. We work with high school science teachers to show them what real research is like. And so that's one of the things that I'm very happy and proud to be able to do, is to work with high school science teachers.
I totally get why you guys have PhDs and I don't know. In all honesty, though, it's really cool to hear. I mean, I love working on it, right? And so much of my job is sort of enabling the kind of science that other people get to do, which is super fun. But then I hear you guys talking about, like, oh, I can't do that. These things just move. It's fine. They move somewhere.
But hey, we wouldn't be doing any of the things without the engineers.
No, it's 100% a part of it. I love my job. Don't get me. I absolutely love being an engineer. But I just look at you guys. I'm like, I couldn't analyze data for that long. I was like, I just want to build something.
This is the single-mindedness that Vandana was talking about.
It's really.
There's one aspect to that, which is, and it's a selfish thing, but at some point, each of us, in our analysis, have been the only person in history to know a piece of information about the universe.
That's so cool. I cannot claim that at all. I mean, except for like what I ate for breakfast, which none of you know. None of you. So.
Cornflakes, right?
No, it was eggs. I made eggs.
Yeah, those are actually all my favorite moments are, so sometimes we do go observing, which is always fun. So you've chosen a target, you're taking a specific measurement, you get the data, it comes on the screen, and straight away you're like, like it's a binary, there's 2 stars, or you see a spectral line that you weren't expecting, and you're like, I know something. That's always great.
It's really cool. That's so cool, guys. All right, so we have some questions from the internet. This one is from @GarrettGirlOnTheGo from Instagram. Besides the scientists and engineers at JPL and NASA, and I think you guys hinted at this a little bit, what are the other types of professionals that comprise work groups for missions and projects to help bring them to fruition? So you can hit on this a little bit. That you obviously write and do science communication, which is a big part of what we do as well.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that every single JPL and Caltech, we employ everybody. Everybody is necessary. There's no one single, basically, job description that is not necessary.
Do you have a tennis coach?
Well,
we do have massage people that come
We
every
do have
once in a
massage
while.
people.
yes. Yeah, because we're just sitting there like this all the time. But no, I mean, that's the thing, is that, but even in terms of, we do have a gym that, there's yoga classes at JPL because, at lunch, some people do want to use, but fundamentally.
Because it's really stressful.
Yeah, but then we have accountants, we have historians, we have people.
Sysadmins. Someone has to run all the computers.
Oh my God, yeah.
Science writers.
Technical writers.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
And the support staff, we could not do the stuff we do without our support staff, which just encompasses every level of expertise. So I think.
Thank you, Renee.
Yeah. But that's the thing is, and I don't know if I missed anything.
Yeah, I mean, we have so many artists who help do renderings, for example, of these things, which I think is always really fascinating. The storytellers, of course, as mentioned.
I think the people who help us visualize the data, I know
Some of them are
Robert
sitting in
is
the
out
audience
there.
right now.
It really helps us understand what is going on when we can see it and visualized by an artist.
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of things like that, right? And there are engineering tasks that aren't directly on missions. They're helping us do augmented reality, and I think accountants is, I think, one of the most underrated jobs because I could never do half of what I do without money, and also can't manage money. So don't trust the engineers with your money.
You're talking about how we all have PhDs. Earlier today, I was literally sitting with the accountant who's working on my proposal, like, I don't understand a spreadsheet. What does this mean? Why is this number here? And she's like, very patiently, this is what this means. And I'm just like, I don't understand.
I agree.
All right, @Kid from Pasadena, also on Instagram, asks, he's 5 years old, and I love science. I'm always looking for cool experiments to try at home. What are some kid-friendly science experiments or activities that might help inspire the next generation of scientists? And you guys have kids.
Yeah, so I have one that's one of my favorites that I just did with my kid, and it's so simple. Like, if you have a pair of binoculars, look at the moon. I think so many people don't look at it, and you can see a lot with just a pair of simple binoculars. You can see craters and rills and like all this geography. So I think that's just the easiest thing you can do.
What I would say is if your parents let you have screen time, go to planethunters.org and look for planets in the data. So we have the Citizen Science Project where you can look at NASA Kepler and NASA TESS data for planets. And planets are actually really easy to find. I have a PhD, but they're really easy to find. I can teach you how to do it in 5 minutes. A 5-year-old could do it. So if you get some screen time, kid, go find some planets.
Another option is you can, there's some nice experiments at jpl.nasa.gov under education. You can certainly look those up.
Thank you.
But on that front, it's actually the really cool thing about looking at the moon is not only do you see the features, but you're seeing the features as they were about 3 seconds ago. That's the light travel time. So suddenly, and just looking up at everything that you're seeing, just looking up at the night sky, even if it's in LA and you don't have very many stars, your eyes are a time machine because light takes time to travel to get to you. So that's one of the things. Just get a star chart and then see what the light years are. And then each star that you're seeing, if it's 5 light years away, you're seeing it 5 years ago. If it's 10 light years away, furthermore, and if you're in a dark enough site and you're seeing the Andromeda Galaxy, that's 2 million years ago. You're seeing it as it was then. So your eyes are some of your best tools. Or if you want to be more tactile, get some, talk to your parents first. Get some flour and get some marbles, and you'll see how craters are made by dropping them from different heights. And that relates to the moon because that's how the craters are made, all that splashing that you see once it hits.
And standard disclaimer, don't look at the sun.
Please, do not.
Without binoculars, with binoculars, don't look at the sun.
Yeah.
I have a kitten, and I like to experiment with sort of toys he likes to play with. And most of them are the cheapest ones are constantly winning. One of the much fancier toys that I bought him disappointed me a lot. One of my favorite weird experiments, which I love, is when I fly, I'll bring like a bag of chips, and I just like to watch the bag slowly expand as we gain altitude because the pressure is reduced around you. It's just weird but cool. All right. Eric Deichart from Instagram asks, which Pasadena-based institution has a stronger connection to the original theory of the Big Bang? Pasadena's Caltech or Carnegie observatories? Well,
Is anyone from Carnegie here?
Yeah.
No,
I know, depends on
Caltech.
who's here.
Caltech is the answer. If no one from Carnegie is here.
Well, I would recommend just, there are several books about that connection.
You're going to go get them. Just Caltech is the answer.
All right, Joanne Windler from Instagram asked, did the writers or talent from the show ever visit Caltech and pretend to be a student or professor? Do you guys
Not to my knowledge.
I know that we've helped them out. So I actually helped on one of the episodes where there's a rover that throws out the first pitch. I got them some nice high-resolution pictures of the Pathfinder rover so they could use as a mock-up for their prop department.
So what I read was that they have a science consultant who's a professor at UCLA on the show.
Did at Salzburg. Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. I've never caught anyone at Caltech pretending.
I mean, I can't say that. And I know that Bill Prady, who's one of the executive producers of the show, has received an award from NASA. So I know there's a deep connection there, and I think a lot of mutual love as well. Okay, Eric, at Garrett Girl on the Go from Instagram asks, Sheldon and Amy are collaborating on their new theory for supersymmetry. What theories and projects are on your bucket list?
Ooh,
Yeah.
bucket list. So one of the things we're really, really trying to find in our search for extrasolar planets is an Earth twin. So a rocky planet that's the size of the Earth, so not a gas giant or an ice giant, but a rocky planet that's the right temperature for liquid water, so not too close to the sun like Mercury or too far away from the sun like Neptune or Pluto, but just the right temperature, and it's around a star like the sun. So we know our sun, we know what kind of radiation our sun puts out. So what we're looking for is something just like that, an Earth twin, and we haven't found it yet, and we've been searching for years, and we will one day. They exist. We're pretty sure if you look at the rest of the planets, there will be planets like the Earth, but just we haven't found it yet. That's the bucket list, Earth twin, Earth 2.0.
Yeah, good.
Hers is really good.
Yeah.
Mine's harder to explain.
Fleet, you got time?
So I said that I was an extragalactic astronomer, and so I'm trying to understand how galaxies form and how they change over time. And part of that is you're trying to understand, galaxies were really active a long time ago, and as cosmic time marches on, they stop forming stars, and they stop having these really massive black hole signatures. And why? We don't know why. And we have some ideas that have to do with the massive black holes, but to really figure out what causes star formation to end in galaxies is one of the things that I've been trying to figure out.
Yeah, so for mine, I'm going at it the other way, is trying to understand the black holes to see how they influence their host galaxies. But in particular, if we can find a way to understand the gas that's falling into it and how luminous it is, we can use them as what's called standard candles, and we can use them as distance indicators. And right now, there are that's a very difficult problem from the very inception of the Big Bang theory. The expansion of the universe is based on knowing the proper distances, and we're getting better at it, but this would be an entirely different way of getting those distances.
Right, because there's some tension right now between different ways of measuring how fast the universe is expanding, which is a measure of how much energy is in the universe. So having a brand new way of doing it would be a really useful calibrator.
Yeah, and if it was easy, it would have been already done. But yeah, it's a very difficult problem to come up with yet another one. But yeah, right now, it's a good time to be an astronomer, at least in this area, because there's a tension between all these different methods.
I love that there's some sort of rivalry in astronomy, like two camps, or maybe more than two camps of these measurements, because I don't think there's as much beef in engineering. But
so my husband is a theorist. He's also an astronomer, and so I'm an observer, and he's a theorist, which is already like Montague and Capulet. And I do exoplanets, and he does galaxies, which is just there's all of this tension. So I just give him crap all the time for how exoplanets are so much more interesting than galaxies. So yes, we have an internal rivalry in our house.
I mean, again, hitting on the same point though, a kind of very singular focus, because I'm I want to do a mission to Venus, I want to do a mission to Europa, I want to do a mission to ice giants. So I feel like there's a ton of those sort of things, yeah.
But I want to do those things too.
Oh, so you're good. Okay, good.
But nobody will let me.
Yeah.
So.
Could have been an engineer. It's less school, and that's about all I got going for it. One thing that always occurs to me, and I think is true for all of us, I worked on a mission to Mars called Curiosity for about 10 years almost in total, and watching sort of lives change and where my life, went over the course of that, and you were also hinting at how long, during the course of your life, how much exoplanets have changed as a category. What sort of personal things have sort of changed over the course of this? I mean, the show reflects that as well, of these personal changes, while we're all kind of focused on our jobs.
So I actually feel like my job has changed more than my personal
cool.
life
Yeah.
in a way. So, the milestones you think of as you go to adulthood, you get married, you have a dog, you have a kid or whatever. I felt like I had to, I met my husband when I was 17. And then and we were both undergrads at Caltech, because I want to get my nerd credit too. So you got yours. And he is a professor of chemical engineering, so he's also a nerd. But we had to move from undergrad to grad school together, and then we had to move from grad school to postdoc together, and then we had to move from postdoc to permanent job together, which, each of those transitions alone is extremely difficult to have two people go to the same cities. I mean, there just aren't that many jobs in these fields. So I feel like that's been the thing that stayed the same, and my job has, changed, and I've had to move a lot.
Did you change anything about what you were pursuing because of those sort of just prioritizing family?
We didn't have to make big compromises because we got lucky. We both got to stay in our fields of choice. But, definitely we both compromised on, we had to get into the same grad school, and maybe he wanted to go to a different one, and then we had different options at different stages. So, but I think we landed pretty well. We got super lucky.
Yeah, you're doing well.
So thinking about this question, I was thinking about how, we live in Los Angeles, so a lot of people are involved in the film industry. And the credits at the end of movies, there's often the babies that were born over the course of the movie. And so recently we did this for the NASA Kepler mission, which, it was basically 2 decades from like real inception and selection and then building and then launching and then all the science. So we did the Kepler babies. And one of the interesting stories that came out of that is that there's an office at the NASA Ames Research Center up in the Bay Area that had 3 female Kepler scientists in it, one after the other. So one was my friend Susan, and she had that office, and she got pregnant, and she had a baby. Then I had that office, and I got pregnant, and I had 2 babies. And then Anne-Marie Cody had that office, and she got pregnant. And how many babies did she have, Varoujan?
Triplets.
She had triplets. Women aren't allowed in that office anymore. Like, we're done. We're capped out on that office. But so Kepler, the big changes that happened over the Kepler mission were the Kepler babies that we talk about. So there's a whole crew of them.
That definitely happened on Curiosity as well, where you saw a lot of people sort of save, and then as soon as we landed, a bunch of people were pregnant all of a sudden, which I was like, makes sense. It's a good time.
So for me, it's actually, it was interesting relating it to the Big Bang Theory. I didn't like the show when it first aired, and in many ways, I think I was watching it, I'm like, why am I watching a documentary? This is not funny. It didn't help that my ex-girlfriend was named Penny at the time. So, then I met my girlfriend at the time, and now wife, and suddenly the show was a lot funnier. Except suddenly it looked like they were following us around, and so we would, Facebook, we were both on Facebook. It's like, oh, we're in a relationship. We should change our Facebook status. There's an entire episode about the Facebook status change for Leonard and his girlfriend at the time. And then and it was like, oh, well, we're doing this thing. I should buy a new suit. And my wife and I went to buy a new suit. Literally the next week, Sheldon and Penny are buying a new suit. So it was marking those things. And then a couple of months ago, my wife found this place where there's a sensory deprivation chamber just for relaxation. I'm like, oh, we should do it. If anybody's been watching, you know that a few weeks ago, Amy and Sheldon went to the sensory deprivation chamber. So apparently they're still following us around. But for me, and then besides, finding a girlfriend, getting married, and now we have a beautiful 6-year-old daughter. But yeah, that's sort of been marking the time. But fortunately, in terms of jobs, I grew up in LA. I moved here when I was 10, and I've managed to stay here the whole time. And so my extended family, my brother and cousins are all here, so I've been seeing all of them have kids and everything. So there's even a slightly larger marker of time just, having come here for Star Trek conventions, like right here at the Pasadena Convention Center. So all of that just somehow sort of is folded in during just those 12 years and even longer.
Yeah, I just very similar because I got a cat, and that's about it. That's what happened. Mostly my cat. All right, so I think we're going to wrap up here. I want to thank our panelists for kind of sharing their lives with us. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let's give them a big round of applause. And we have a special guest, the mayor of Pasadena, Mr. Terry Tornick, who is somewhere. Oh, he's coming up. I'm going to hand him my microphone. Thank you, guys. I'll be followed by the show.
Well, good evening. When I was listening to the team that they were talking about, the various specialists and technicians that made up, I didn't hear mayor in that, but here I am. So many people know Pasadena for a whole series of different reasons. There are a couple of thousand people here tonight because there's a Johnny Mathis concert next door. It's a little different demographic. But, some people know Pasadena because of the parades, and some people know us because we've got 590 restaurants now, and some people know us as the city of astronomy, which is something we've been promoting and many of you are sensitive to and aware of. But it turns out that there's a huge cohort of people, not just in the United States, but around the world, that know us because of the Big Bang Theory. And when I, and you should applaud. I mean, I have to tell you honestly that when I realized that, I was a little huffy about it because I thought, wow, I mean, you know, we've got all these phenomenal things, all these great schools and Caltech and the Arts Center and all this other stuff, and museums and things that we're so proud of. And yet they know us for the Big Bang Theory. And then I said, you're really being a jerk about this, because the show has really depicted Pasadena, I think, in a wonderful way, and has really helped in many ways to build the brand of the city as a place that interesting people are doing fascinating things in a very human way. So frankly, the 12-year run that this show has had has really added a lot to our city's history and culture, and we congratulate everyone associated with it, and are really sad to see it moving into history, but we'll be proud to have identified Pasadena as the home of the Big Bang Theory. Thank you very much.
All right, well, we want to give a quick thank you. I got to read this part because if I miss some thank yous, it's on me and not the wonderful people here. So we want to give a quick thank you to everybody, for all our partners providing their time and resources to the event, to Visit Pasadena, the Pasadena Convention Center for hosting and sponsoring it. The city of Pasadena has been a huge help in providing resources and support in putting together this event. To JPL, of course, my employers, I have to thank them for the interactive displays. If you didn't catch those outside, and some of the live streaming of this as well that's going on, you can catch that later as well. To Caltech for their planning team and other resources, and last but not least, to a big thank you to our panels, and get a big round of applause for everybody again. So I'd like to invite you guys all to watch the screens here, as the cast of The Big Bang Theory has a special thank you to the community of Pasadena, and let's watch that footage.